All right. Peace. We are here live at direct. This is Moors in America. Here we are about to today on this broadcast. We are about to show how the Moors were erased from the American story. We're showing the hidden indigenous identity of the Moors, right? And showing how the Moors. If you see the thumbnail on here, you see the two versions of the seal, the city or town seal for Hillsborough, New York. In here you will see how the Moors were erased from the seals, but how they are revealed by the science. So it doesn't matter what they said, what has been done, what how people have tried to hide things. It doesn't matter whose feelings are getting hurt by the truth being revealed. We're gonna do it, and we're going to do it with the visual evidence, but also with the historical and also modern genetic science. This is going to be a very compelling presentation that you will want to share, even maybe even play. Well, definitely to play in your classrooms to expose the children to real history, real truth, real science. It's not being discussed and talked about, even though it's out there now. The cat is out the bag. So, no more lies. We're bulldozing through the lies. We're destroying the lies with the truth. Just plain and simple. And so we're going to go ahead and get things started. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. You're listening to The True and Living. Lightbringer, Moors in America. As always, I'm your brother, Lloyd Douglas L., also known as Sharif Ali. Here, Moors in America, we are uncovering and bringing glorious light to all issues pertinent to the Moorish American paradigm, because that is what we do here on this podcast, known as Moors in America. So wherever you're watching this from whether you're on YouTube or Facebook, make sure that you are following, subscribed, whatever you have to do to be able to keep in touch with that page. Make sure that you're subscribed, that you're following, like the page. If you're on Instagram or and you're not connected to us, make sure that you go connect to @Moors in America on Instagram. We're also on we're also on X, formerly known as Twitter as well. So follow us on all the platforms, and if you're watching it on Facebook, go and subscribe on YouTube too. All right, so here we go. Let's just go ahead and jump into things. No point in playing things out, making it take longer than it has to. Let's just jump into it. We'll play all the theme music and all that stuff later. If you want to hear it, make sure to stick around and hear some hot Moorish music. And but we're gonna get straight to business right now. And let's go ahead and just jump into it more. So I'm glad that you're here. I want to thank everybody for being here. And as I said, we're getting things started. Now, first and foremost, I just want to talk about more than likely what you're seeing on the screen, what you saw on the thumbnail. You saw this picture from Whitesboro, New York, right? So this is the seal, the official seal. This is from Smithsonian Magazine. This New York Village, right? They have this official seal. It shows this white settler, these are their words, not mine, strangling a Native American. Okay. And there was some controversy over this just a couple of years ago, back in 2016. People were complaining, saying this is a racist image. All right. And as you can see in here, you have obviously this is a white man strangling a dark brown skinned Indian, what they would call a red man. Okay. So Whitesboro has several thousand people living there. They talked about changing the image. They decided not to. That was the story given to the people. That's what everybody, talked about. Hey, are they going to change it? I guess 2017. The next year they decided, nah, we ain't changing nothing. But they did update it. Okay. They took the hands of the so-called white man, the white settler, off of the Indian's neck, and then showed them grappling like they're wrestling now. And they also made a change that nobody covered. And this was spoken about in the New York Times, Smithsonian Magazine, right? Let me give you some other examples too. So this was spoken about in several different places. We also had it was covered on the Daily Show on Comedy Central. And remember, this is what it looked like for many, many years. And there's some people making fun of the imagery. This is actually an accurate depiction of what you see here, because you see what that so-called Indian looks like, right? This is what they originally, created for their town photo. All right, they made fun of it with the reversal. It was covered on the Daily Show on Comedy Central. Nobody spoke about the obvious though. So the decision was made to update the image and change the complexion of the so-called Indian to the point where the Indian looks just like this settler, this pioneer, this colonist that he's wrestling against, that he's fighting against. They're the same. Which one's the Indian? Which one's the colonist? It's like Halloween. They could just switch costumes. They're the same person. So it was updated. And nowadays, this is what passes for Indian. Okay? Just want to show you the old picture versus the new picture. Nobody's saying anything about that aspect of it. This is the only place you hear anybody even pointing that out. So the revamped logo. Let's see if they mention how old that logo is in here. Might have to pull that up on Google real quick. Nobody's speaking about the obvious. Like why did you change the skin complexion of this Native American, right? So Whitesboro town seal, let's pull that up. Let's see what we get. So Whitesboro's seal, we'll just do seal. Let's see if we can get an age on that. The seal goes back to the late 1800s and depicts a pivotal moment in the founding of our town and village. So this is from Syracuse newspaper. The mayor speaking on when he was interviewed on the Daily Show. So that logo image where you have the dark brown skin Indian goes back to the 1800s, and that's how they depicted them. But in the 2017, they changed it. Why was that change made? And nobody even said anything about that. That's obvious, right? You think like the Daily Show, hey, let's make fun of how they made them. They changed the Indian into a white man. Nobody said anything about that. Nothing about that even mentioned, right? So let's this isn't the only place this has occurred though. It's definitely not the only place. Got some more images for you. Let's go to Florida. Let's look at the Florida state seal. See if we see anything about this. So this is the state seal. This is what it looked like before 1868. And it stayed like this for a long time. Now this indigenous American isn't even dark brown. Their skin is very, very dark. Okay? And that's the great state seal for Florida. But let's see what it looks like now. So this is before 1868. And then this is what happened after the update in 1985. This is more than 120 years later. They decided to update that. So you had an image of maybe a Seminole woman. Back here looks like you have a very dark skinned indigenous person wearing a turban. Then you get the update. Okay? So the dress, the clothing looks similar to the Seminole clothing. But here you have an actual picture. All right, maybe 1800s picture of actual Seminole Indians. It says Seminole Indian and Bride, Miami, Florida. Okay? Now there are so-called black people. There are Moors walking around here in the Americas right now that look like this. These are real Seminole Indians. Okay? And then you have the update. Now the update pretty much looks just like the colonizers. And we see this happening all over the place. Now we're going back to an older image, right? Dark skin, dark brown skin. This is the state seal for Florida. And then going to the updated image. This is at the House of Representatives in Florida. Okay. So we have this change occurring all over the place, not just in New York. This is something that's just happening across the board, and it's been happening for years. It's not even just limited to the depictions that you see for the state seals, right? We have other examples as well. So we've seen this Florida, okay. Village of Whitesboro, New York. Nobody even talks about it. But then also, even in other things, like this is an older book. All right, Yellow Thunder, Our Little Indian Cousin. This is the original cover. Yellow Thunder, Our Little Indian Cousin. Look at how he looks. And then this newer version of the book, right, with the whitewashed image. Let's pull that up. Let's get the date on this book so we can see why, what's going on here. All right. Let's get a date on this book. All right. So let's see. This was written by Mary Hazelton Wade. She was born in 1860. She put out Our Little Brown Cousin in 1901. Our Little Indian Cousin, 1901. Okay, so she put out these children's books to just show all these different, basically all these different people. All right. Now, just so that people know, this is not this isn't like something that's been photoshopped. All right. This is the Yellow Thunder, Our Little Indian Cousin. This is what it originally looked like when she put it out in 1901. And then you have the updated version. All right. So we're not making this up. Not making this up, people. All right. And so this is something that's been occurring for a while. All right. Just in our society, period, as a whole. This is what's been going on. Just, as far as the imagery is so powerful. So the imagery had to be changed. All right. And then just going back to this. That's not the only level. This is happening on so many levels. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But we'll just leave it there right now for a second. Now, this is insane. Like, why do you have to update the image? Why is there even a need to update the image to make it to lighten up the skin color of the indigenous people? Why? Why not just keep it the same? Why are we trying to lighten everything up? So everything has been geared towards concealing the true identity of the indigenous Americans. But we're going to show that this isn't just something that's limited to books, limited to state seals, limited to city seals. No, it's been going on for a while. Now, when you look at that Florida state seal, when you see that comparison, going back to that, right, the before 1868, looking more like the actual indigenous people. All right. Very dark skinned people, dark brown skinned people. Okay. You see that. These people have African features or Afro features, what usually is associated with African people, even though these people lived all over the world, these so-called African people. And then they're turned into lighter skinned people with more Eurocentric features. All right. When you see the seal, it has people who are obviously copper complexion, which is what the indigenous Americans were described as, right? Maybe you could even say Afro-Indigenous people. But they're changed into a whole new appearance. And this stuff is still happening. It's still happening to the point where it's comical, because with the New York, with the Village of Whitesboro, right? Whitesboro, New York. It's comical when you look at them side by side, because you see that they turned the indigenous American into the colonists, literally. It's the same. It's the same thing. When originally this was made in 1868. In 1868, there was a difference. You had the colonists from Europe choking the copper skinned indigenous American, and now they're both brothers from Europe. You know, they're basically brothers. Play wrestling, playing dress up. It's like Halloween. It's crazy, right? So seeing that, just seeing them side by side is ridiculous. It's comical, and nobody spoke on it. Nobody said a peep about that. Like, come on, when you see the updated version, isn't that obvious that what happened to this guy, right? So it's crazy, and the change in complexion and identity is radical. It's drastic. But this isn't just something that's just visual. It's been done in academia. It's been made official, and it's something that can't be denied. And we're going to show that today. I don't want to just have pictures of people thinking these are just memes. No, this stuff is real. This is really done, and it's still being instituted, and it's still being taught to the children, to the people, so that this lie is still being perpetuated to this day. Now, I was going to this because some of you may have seen this meme online where you see this. It says Cleveland Indians mascot, March 17th, 1925. You might look at this and think, oh, what is this? It means nothing. I mean, it looks like the little child has a bow and arrow. Okay, you see the guy. He's obviously got the Cleveland jersey and stuff for baseball. Okay, this is actually taken from a news article, a real news article from March 17th, 1925 in the Cleveland newspaper. Okay, and what does it say here? Now, you see the ball player petting this boy, this Asiatic boy, right? He's a Moor, and he's got the bow and arrow. He's petting him on the head. Now, let's see what it says about this article. The Cleveland Indians presented with mascot at opening of the new $125,000 athletic field at Lakeland, Florida. So they down here practicing for spring training, right? Their training camp. Hamp posed with manager Tris Speaker after his presentation to the club. Other dignitaries in attendance besides Hamp include Judge. All right, so moving on, right? So this is obviously like real. This is a depiction of the Cleveland Indians. They're out here playing with for spring training, and they got their mascot here with them. And their mascot is a little Asiatic boy. Okay? He represented the Cleveland Indians. He was the mascot. He went out there with a little bow and arrow. All right, 1925. That was accepted. That was understood. Oh, he's supposed to be the Indian. Okay? People don't know this, or you seen the meme, you didn't know where it came from. Now that's real. This really happened. Wasn't that long ago. 1925, I guess, exactly 100 years ago. All right, so this has been going on for a while where there's been a cover up. This is an old book from the 1800s, I believe. The Indian races of North and South America. So we have an account of the principal Aboriginal races, a description of their national customs, mythology, religious ceremonies, history of their most powerful tribes, and it's going on. If you want to look this up, Charles D. Wolfe Brownell. All right. Numerous and diversified illustrations. So there's pictures in here. Check it out. We're just going to go over a few pages. Looking in here, just right away in the beginning of the book, we're looking at the Indian races of North and South America. This is supposed to be a depiction of Fernando Cortez, and King Montezuma. Remember, Montezuma described as a Moorish king. All right. They're depicted with the obvious copper-colored skin. That's brown, people. Okay? It's crazy. Some people try to get mad over this, man. It's ridiculous. But the truth is out, man. We're not going backwards. All right, so moving again, just going to look at some of the descriptions in here of the indigenous Americas and just some of the concepts or ideas about the origin of these people. So they're saying some theorists have indefatigably followed up the idea we are to search for the lost tribes of Israel amongst the red men of America, and have found or fancied resemblances otherwise accountable between Indian and Hebrew words, ceremonies, and superstitions, talking about how their cultures line up with the cultures in the East. Others have exhibited equal ingenuity in carrying out a comparison between the Moors of Africa and the Americans, claiming to establish a near affinity in character and complexion between the two races. They suppose the Moorish immigrants to have arrived at the West India Islands or eastern coast of South America, and thence to have spread over the whole continent. All right? These are the early theories from the people, who first came here. And then just going back how this lines up with chapter 47 in the Quran of the Holy Moorish Science Temple, the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Right? The Moabites from the land of Moab, who received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit northwest Africa. They were the founders and are the true possessors of the present Moroccan Empire. Their dominion, its an inhabitation extended from northeast and southwest Africa, across the Great Atlantis, even into the present North, South, and Central America, and also Mexico and the Atlantis Islands before the Great Earthquake, which caused the Great Atlantic Ocean. We're going to speak on this because actually what we're going to talk about today is going to show how this all lines up. And if you saw what was just up here on the screen, right, just speaking about how there's an obvious cover-up of the indigenous people, of their actual lineage. They say that all these people, the Taino were wiped out, the Carib were killed. We killed them all. They're gone. There's only a few of them left. All right. There's only a few of them left because they don't know who they are. Right. This is not made up. The Civil Rights Act of 1968 was actually referred to as the Indian Civil Rights Act, or the Indian Bill of Rights. This was the nickname for the Civil Rights Act in 1968, which was specifically supposed to be aimed at the so-called Negro, the so-called black people. All right. Why was it nicknamed the Indian Civil Rights Act, Indian Bill of Rights? So you see these memes and stuff, but you may not understand that there's actual historical artifacts backing this up. There's actually been laws that have been made. There have been codes that have been made, all types of verifiable paper trails showing how this occurred, how these people have been covered up. So people that are angry about this, it doesn't make any sense. You had this guy named Walter Plecker, who was on a mission to reclassify as many so-called Negroes as possible. Pardon me. He was trying to reclassify as many so-called Indians as possible to Negro, right? In the 1930s, he was on a rampage, especially in Virginia, right? He classified the whole entire Chickahominy tribe, right? The whole entire tribe in New Kent County. He classified or reclassified them all as Negroes. And this was happening all over the place, right? This was being done. This is in the 1930s, but this was being done wholesale all over the place, right? And if we're looking at this article, right, from September 10th, 1930, the Chickahominy Indians in New Kent County have become disturbed over the possibility that they will be classed as Negroes in the 1930 census due to the efforts of Dr. W.A. Plecker, Registrar of the Virginia State Bureau of Vital Statistics. They're taking steps to prevent such a contingency. Why? Because they're the only ones that's keeping the tribal ways. They're the only ones that are even, keeping the culture and all that stuff going. They are those people, right? How are you going to just classify them as Negroes? But that's what happened. But it wasn't just in Virginia. There's another video on this channel. If you want to look, if you're on Facebook, it'll probably be really easy for you to find. But there's another video on here which specifically speaks about what happened to the Montauk Indians, let me just go to it really quickly for you. Um, it's on YouTube and it's on the Facebook channel. So if you check that video out, it's about the Montauk Indians. It shows how they the whole entire tribe was declared extinct in the New York Supreme Court. They were declared extinct, even though the chief is standing there in the courtroom. The whole entire tribe is there, or at least most of the tribal members are there to speak for themselves, and they're declared extinct right there on the spot, right? So this wasn't like something that, okay, that's Walter Plecker, that's Virginia. No, it was happening all over the nation. And how can you declare them extinct when they're the only ones that are even holding to the traditions? They're the only ones that are living as those people, right? So that, yeah, just wanted to bring that up really quickly for you. Make sure you go and check this out. Not a long video, but it shares the facts. Really compelling video that shows that case. You can find that on the YouTube channel too. So yeah, check that out, from Indian to Black, Black or Civiliter Mortus, which of course means that you're civilly dead. You have no rights, right? Great video, and just showing you, because this is what happened all over the place. It wasn't just limited to one spot, one location. So this was something that was being carried out with a definite plan. Like, we're gonna wipe these people out. And even though they didn't go quietly, right, they're taking steps to prevent this from happening. You know, in many cases, you know, these are the people who are also, their communities are being attacked. They're you know, fighting against lynching and all of these things. And also on paper, they're being destroyed. They're being wiped out of history, right? So this was happening across the board, people. Just, you know, crazy, insane, even just have to deal with that. But it's very real. When you look in history, though, well, before you go to history, I mean, we can just look in our own families. Many of you have grandparents, grandmother, grandfather, who may have told you that they have Indian in their family, right? And this is what we're talking about, our own family members. This is just one example of some people who, these brothers are triplets. They were in Oklahoma. Everybody knew that they were full-blooded Choctaw Indians, right? They played sports. It was just known. It was understood. Everyone knows. And these are people who, like, when you look, even looking at the early depictions of how Indians were, you know, so-called Indians were depicted, this is how they looked. And you can see why they had to switch and change the logos, like you saw in Whitesboro, New York, to this. Because these people, this is what, like, the Washington Redskins and the Cleveland Indians logo look like, right? There's no kidding, no joke about that. So it wasn't just the sports logos. This is how they were depicted. This is how they were described. This is understood. Even going back to the 1920s, even though they had already started the deception, it was understood amongst most people that our people, the Moors, were here, right? And so there's no confusion in why so many of our people have stories and understanding of having, you know, indigenous bloodlines, right? It's not because the slaves were running and joining the tribes. No, it goes even deeper than that. So looking at it from a historical perspective, it's backed up. It's supported. There's always been this Moorish presence, and it was known amongst the tribes, amongst the indigenous people here. What you see on the screen, this is actual, this is someone historically that's rose to some prominence. It's known that Chief Silas Jefferson was actually a Muskogee. Now, he was born in 1835 in the Old Creek Nation. And he was actually known by his Muskogee name, right, which was Utoko Miko. All right, he was the Wind Clan chief. And so he actually served in the Indian Home Guard during the Civil War. People can't even deny this. And so, you know, so-called black Indians like Jefferson was able to prove that the line between African and Native was not really that sharp. It wasn't so sharp because it's known. Okay, this guy's Muskogee. He's Muskogee. There's no denying it. When you hear people like ODB, who old dirty bastard from New York, I believe Staten Island, who said it in one of the Wu Tang songs. He's talking about his grandfather sold Manhattan to the white man, right? And he's going back through his lineage and his relation to his real grandfather, who was I believe Paul Cuffey, maybe William or Paul Cuffey. I can't remember right now, but their last name's Cuffey for real, and they're actually related to the last full-blooded chief, right, of the Shinnecock Indians. And it's, even though he didn't go all in depth into the history, that's how it really lines up. But people aren't talking about this. They're trying to throw all this away and say, okay, yeah, but whatever. You got some of the people who are upset about this coming out. They're trying to attack, trying to fight back, and it's just the cat is out of the bag now. There's no going back. There's no going back, right? Because it's known that people like Silas Jefferson was actually the real deal chief, full blooded Muskogee. There's no stories of being, the son of an escaped slave who joined the tribe and became the chief. Like, come on, man, get the hell out of here, right? So that time's over. It's time for the truth to come out, right? There's a lot, more that I want to go into. So let's go ahead and just start to look at some of the actual evidence, some of the things that's been covered up, and this actually been known. It's been out there for a long time. So I wanted to go to this book real quick. We're just gonna go through some of the facts in here. This is a really good book. It's from David Imhotep, PhD. Brother, rest in peace to this brother. David Imhotep. He's a author, a lecturer. This brother's a professor, right? And he has some thorough info in this book. Just want to give respect to him. Looking at the photo that's on the cover, right? This photo, right? There's a little excerpt in here about this photo. This was actually an old photo, I think from 1870. Let me see. Yeah, okay. So the picture on here was taken from the voyage of the HMS Challenger on the 1872-1876 voyage. It was funded by the British government for scientific purposes. This indigenous man's picture was taken at the southernmost tip of South America at Tierra del Fuego. The expedition is believed to be the first to carry an official photographer, and that picture can be found in London's Natural History Museum today. This very picture, this was an indigenous man who lived all the way down, like, I'm thinking Tierra del Fuego. I mean, that must have been in either Argentina or maybe Chile. And he was an indigenous American. All right. But there's so much more compelling information in this book. We're just gonna go ahead and skip around in here a little bit. I want to speak just about a few things that's in here. He has a lot of quotes in here from people like Barry Fell. Barry Fell wrote several books about early America, prehistoric America. But he's got a lot of compelling information. So I'm going to skip around a little bit, but just bear with me. And this book, yeah, it is out of print. But it's a great book to have. If you want to, reach out about the PDF, you can just send me an email or comment on here. We can talk on the side, and I'll just send it to you. I ain't trying to charge or nothing like that. But yeah, this is a good book. I got the actual book, before he made the transition. It's a pretty good book. But just looking in here a little bit, right? Now he's speaking on some of the artifacts and things that show that some of the early mound builders were actually pygmies, were actually like short, people under 4 feet tall. And they were, people who would be considered African. They were dark skinned. They were Moorish. All right, and he's speaking about their interactions with other people. Like in here, saying we see that the small African Skrellings were the first people the Vikings say they saw. So, from a European perspective, they'll tell us that the Vikings, maybe came over here in the early, like around 1000 AD. All right, and they actually wrote of their journey because you had Leif Erikson and I believe his son also. They wrote about their journey coming into the early Americas, coming into North America. So they talked about seeing this small African Skrellings. They called them Skrellings. Those are the first people they saw in the extreme northern part of the Americas, the Arctic, and Canada, according to Olson's 1962 17-volume set. Then we see the diminutive African people of Tierra del Fuego, like the dude you saw on the cover of the book, right? They're the last remnants of the first Americans seen at the extreme southern part of the Americas. So they were seen all the way from the northern part of North America all the way down to the south. All right. And then going further into this, right? Now, this is saying, speaking of the Mongolians, right? The Asian people who came over, that they say came over to Bering Strait. Speaking of the Mongolians, Childress write, they were mound builders. They were mound builder attackers and mound destroyers, not mound builders. This data also makes it plain that the Mongolians were not the mound builders. Could the Vikings have been the mound builders? No, because the Vikings or other Scandinavians are the least of all the groups to have been mound builders because they arrived far after them. All right. The short people, let me zoom in on this a little bit. The race of short, stout, flat-featured men and women, to whom the quote above refers, were in the Americas 56,000 years ago, tens of millennia before their later diminutive ancestors began to build mounds in the Americas. Based on this evidence, it's most likely that these short people did not predate the mound builders, but were one and the same. There are thousands of mound dwellings in the British Isles alone. It seems that these mounds in ancient Britain were built by diminutive Africans as well. All right. So just speaking about the early indigenous Americans. So you actually have artifacts and bones and skulls and that have been found in America that show pygmy type people who were, short. So they had smaller skulls, shorter stature. And nobody's really talking about this. There's a few, Moorish scholars, researchers, like our brother Toriano Obashango L. Shout out to him. And shout out to our brother Cannon, Tyrone Cannon, researchers who, speak about this, putting this out fearlessly, but nobody else is talking about it. Nobody else is connecting the dots. And shout out to much respect, rest in peace to our brother David Imhotep. All right, but nobody else is talking about this, but it's known. It's a known fact. Now, speaking about Phil, Phil admitted that the Native Americans, speaking about the American Indians, right, meaning those the Mongoloid type people that came over, they did not use stone in their constructions, save for some rare instances. This discussion is not just about cut stone. We were told that the Americans did not use cut stone in their construction or megalith stones, thousands of pounds in weight. Additionally, some of these stones were carried long distances from the quarry, as many as 4 or 5 miles away. So the stones, the structures, the things that were created by civilized people like the mound builders, were being mined and being carried, from quarries and places that were far away from the towns and the cities where they were built at. And they're saying that there's no way that the Mongolian stock, those people built that. They didn't build it. They couldn't. They didn't know. They didn't cut stone. They didn't build houses out of stone. They had teepees, They had, houses built out of twigs and animal skins and, mud huts. They didn't have that. They didn't have that capability. They didn't have that technology. Okay. As mentioned earlier in Fell's Bronze Age America, African or Eskimo mound chambers were not confined to New England, but have been found in Canada as well. All right. And they speak in here about some of these structures, how the doorway was real short and it was diminutive, like the whole entire structure on the inside, because some of these people actually lived in like earthen mounds and lived in houses that were kind of like built into the ground, right? And the inside structure was built for a shorter person, right? A smaller person, right? But once again, because on the inside of the walls, the skeleton of the walls, just like in modern homes, they had stones in there, right? They had, stones and cut wood and stuff like that. So, it was the way that it was built. They're saying it's like similar to the Hobbit's home in the movie Lord of the Rings, right? And then this was found all over. It was found throughout Europe, Greenland, Canada, northeastern America, Ohio, West Virginia, and Virginia. The major difference between these two types of mound homes is that the entrance was very small. Sometimes the entrance was 2 by 2 feet, which is too small and inconvenient for a normal sized man to use as the only entrance. A diminutive person, however, could enter very easily. All right. So there are mounds found all over the eastern part of North America, but there are more mound sites along the Mississippi and Ohio rivers than anywhere else in North America. Baldwin stated in 1871 there were 500 mounds in Rose County, Ohio alone at the time that he wrote his book. All right. Then you have more words. There's another person, Dr. Gregory Little, who if you follow him online, like he's always posting artifacts. He's always posting this. He's always posting like pottery or even artifacts that are made out of like copper and other metal. They have this depiction on it that is called the Hamza, or the eye of Fatima, which is basically a hand with the eye in the middle of it. Okay, and so this symbol is associated with Morocco, but also going back even more ancient than that, it's associated with the Phoenicians, right? The Phoenician Canaanite people. All right, and he's always posting that because it's found throughout the Americas, found in the mounds, literally. Right? Sometimes it's carved into stone or carved into metal. But this, and he's just like, oh, isn't that interesting? Not really going into, the actual origin or nature of like where this symbol's coming from. But we know what's going on. This is ours, right? This actually reconnects us back to what was up here on the screen from chapter 47 in our Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America. The prophet said that our ancestors came from, basically came from the Levant, settled in north or northwestern Africa, and then came over here into the Americas before the great earthquake which caused the Atlantic Ocean. It really did. Right? But looking at the words of Dr. Gregory Little, the author of the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Native American Mounds and Earthworks, he said that after visiting several thousand mounds and reviewing the literature, I'm fairly certain over a million mounds once existed, and perhaps over 100,000 still exist. Okay? But remember, those Asian, Mongolian, Mongoloid type people did not build any of that stuff, and they definitely weren't cutting stone, and they definitely weren't doing any metal work. None. All right, looking towards the south to a town called Epps in West Carroll Parish, there is a massive mound site called Poverty Point that contains several mounds. One huge mound that Little found is dated as early as 3800 BC. 3800 BC. That's 800 years before the Mongolian Asian invasion of North America. At the southern end of the continent, Louisiana borders the Gulf of Mexico. So here we see that if the Americans did begin to build mounds in the Americas, it was after the Proto-Americans had begun building them. There may be even older mounds off the southeastern Florida coast underwater. But the oldest mounds found in North America are not found at Poverty Point, Louisiana. They appear on Horace Island, now Marco Island, in southwestern Florida off the Gulf Coast. These mounds have been carbon dated and could be as old as 4,380 BC. All right. So that's 1,380 years before the Mongolians entered the Americas. So they could not have built the first mounds in the Americas, nor could any other people. So the mound builder, remember, they were also these. Speaking about the Mongolians, they were the attackers of the mound builders. They were the mound builder destroyers. They were not the mound builders. So when people like that are starting to get mad and upset, it's just because the truth is coming out. There's nothing you can do about it. Nothing. We're not the only ones saying this. Archaeologists suspect an Olmec influence at Poverty Point. Some of the unique artifacts found at Poverty Point are similar to artifacts found at Olmec sites along the Gulf of Mexico. In Mexico, the people at Poverty Point engaged in extensive trading. Materials from Ohio, Lake Michigan, and Lake Superior in North Carolina have been excavated from the site. So what we're saying is, with this, what Dr. David Imhotep is saying in here, let's pull up a map. Speaking about Poverty Point in Louisiana. Okay. So this is recognized. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But if we're looking at where this is in relation to these artifacts that have been found there, he's saying there's artifacts that have been found here at Poverty Point that are from, let's say, where did he say they're from again? Materials from Ohio, Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, and North Carolina have been excavated from Poverty Point. So when he's saying that, let's look at the map and see how far this is away. So Poverty Point is in northern Louisiana. All right. And then he's saying they've excavated materials there. It's from North Carolina, Ohio, Lake Superior. Like this is the Great Lakes region. Lake Superior, Lake Michigan. And so when you're looking at the Great Lakes, he's probably talking about copper. Because the Great Lakes area, the indigenous Americans were mining copper and shipping it all throughout the nation, possibly even internationally. So you had trade going on there. You had these rivers that were being used as highways to send these items all over. This Mississippi River, the Ohio River, right? These different rivers were actually being used as highways to transport goods, to participate in trade at a high level. And so this was being done throughout the Americas. And then once again, going back to the Quran, the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America, the Prophet let us know that the Niger River and the Nile River were man-made. And they were created for trade, for commerce. All right? So this was being done over here as well as over there on the other side of the Atlantic. The Nile River was dredged and made by the ancient pharaohs of Egypt in order to trade with the surrounding kingdoms. Also, the Niger River was dredged by the great pharaoh of Egypt, and it extended westward across the great Atlantic. And that's why you can still, to this day, if you know how to sail, you can tap into that river current that is still there, that runs through the Atlantic Ocean. Will take you all the way into the Americas, right? So this is being done at a high level. And even though no one else is talking about it, we know who we are. No one else is going to say it like this. So we have to know what we're looking at, Moors. So there's no other reason why they're finding these materials from Ohio, Great Lakes area, North Carolina, in Poverty Point. Trade was taking place. Saying some mound sites were laid out scientifically, displaying the presence of sophisticated culture. A reproduction of the Marco Island mounds just off southwestern Florida coast makes it apparent they were purposely laid out mathematically in geometric embankments, deliberately shaped. Similarly, in central Florida, near Lake Okeechobee, the Ortona Indian mounds, located north of La Belle, Florida, are 17 mounds and distinctive geometric earthworks. Most of the mounds in Ohio have not been measured, with the exception of the earthworks at the Hopewell site. So the mounds at Marco Island, Central Florida, and Ohio were laid out mathematically in geometric forms. The Hopewell site was utilized in the period between 500 BC to AD 500. Today, the general public does not know very much about the ancient mounds, so they do not have very much respect for them and remove them whenever needed. All right. But he's just saying, going on more. Clearly, North America's so-called Indian mounds were not crude poles of dirt heaped up by primitive savages. They were instead examples of applied geometry, materials handling, advanced planning, design, and organized workforce and construction skills. Public works engineers, astronomers, and metalsmiths. The land's first farmers and potters. All right, some of the mounds were actually used to like smelt iron, and they know that because of how it's structured, how it's laid out. So it's like, wow, they're not talking about any of this stuff. They're not telling us, what's actually going on. But this is what it is, Moors. And even when you go to Mexico, don't forget the Mayan legend that said a dwarf built the pyramid of the magician, Uxmal. Let's pull that one up because that's one of the more impressive pyramids too. The pyramid of the magician, right? And it's like where they get that name from. So I'm thinking the Aztecs got that name from the actual Olmecs. They were keeping that going. All right, yeah. But look at this. This is one of the impressive ones too. When you look at that pyramid of the magician, this is said to be built by a dwarf. Okay, remember just going back to that, the dwarfs, the pygmies were dark skinned, so-called Africans, right? Dark skinned people that nowadays they would look and say, oh, that's a black person, that's African, right? But these were Asiatics. I'll just put it like that. Right, and yeah, this is definitely one of the more impressive ones out there, right, in Mexico or Central America. But just showing that, just to get the visual. But going back to this, right? So you had the link to Central America, also to what's going on in North America, right? Saying you had similarities between the Olmecs and what they found in what they call Poverty Point now, right? The Maya during their pre-classical period built pyramids over the top covering of the older Olmec pyramids to disguise the Olmec origin of the pyramids. It was the Mandingo Olmecs who brought the pyramid building religious technology and writing to the Mayans from Africa. The Mayan looked upon the Olmecs as gods. For example, several Mayan gods were actually Negroid. I don't go along with this Negroid and black stuff, but I know what he's trying to say. Negroid and characterized as having very dark skin. Ekchua and Shaman are perfect examples. The Maya also had several black kings. Fishfin, Itzmanj, Balaam. Balaam, that's Baal. Remember we spoke about the Baal. Let me show you that. There's another video on here. You really have to get in and go into the YouTube, especially if you're just following on Facebook. Make sure you go and subscribe on YouTube. There's a lot of videos on there that you're not going to find on the Facebook page. Even though the Facebook page, it does have a lot of videos too. Everybody needs to go and watch this video. Just go to YouTube, hit subscribe, and check this out, Baal. All right. And shout out to Warlock Asylum. Shout out to that brother, right? But you go in here, you watch this. This breaks down the Baal, the Canaanite titles. All right. The understanding of, why the Canaanites used the L and what they say Baal, but Baal was actually pronounced Baal. So make sure you go and watch that video. Maybe we can link to that in the description too, but make sure you go and check that out just so you have better understanding. So when you're here in ancient America and you see Balaam, Baalam, all right, anytime you see that, you're dealing with the L's and Bays. All right. So these names were over here, and these were the Mayan kings. All right. And they were depicted as dark skinned Moors. And understanding too, as it said here, the Mayans must have been multiracial and integrated to begin with. So they were in some ways the descendants of the Olmecs, or descendants of the Olmecs, and maybe other people like the so-called Mongoloid people who came over, right? And when you look, when you go to Bonampak, right? Let's pull this up real quick. When you go to Bonampak, there's some temples that you have to go to. If you go here, if you're ever able to go to Mexico, these are some of the places you have to go. Now, Bonampak isn't as easy to get to, but you have to go there. And you have to go and look at the temples and see how on the inside walls, which has still been preserved, which is amazing because this stuff's still been preserved. I'm surprised they didn't cover this up yet. When you go and you look in the inside of the temples and see how they were depicted, right? How they depicted themselves or depicted their rulers, their kings. All right. These people are dark skinned. And not only just dark skinned, but they also have dreadlocks. They also have braids. They also have turbans. They also have fezzes. They even, like, some of them look like they have the rags tied on their head, like, even the same way people do today with with the different rags that people wear on their heads and tie it in the front, whether it's tied in the front or the back. They did all of that. It's wild, right? And you'll see them wearing animal skins and all types of stuff, and with the hair, with the braids and the dreadlocks, right? And this stuff was in full color, and they made sure to depict them having dark skin, even though they have all different shades of brown, just like we do today. These people literally, it's almost like they were, in some ways, it's like okay, yeah, they're depicting themselves in the past, but also it's like they're depicting us in the future, like how we look now. All right. And I mean that for real. Like, you have to go and, like, really look into it. You have to actually go there and see for yourself, because some of this stuff you can't even find online. You have to actually go there. All right. But you go, you see, and you see they actually, are doing the same things that we're doing today. All right. So yeah, so just showing that, just an example, but going back into this book. All right. So this is, just in general speaking about the indigenous Americans from North, South, Central America, um, and the Caribbean. Um, Speaking about the Olmec, has been labeled as the first, I guess you'd say, the first civilization in America. A theoretical date for the origin of the Olmec civilization beginning is 1500 BC. All right, let's pull up a clock so we can get this timeline straight, because you might be thrown off by that stuff. When you're talking about 1500 BC, okay, so we're here where it says 82,000. Go back 1,000 years to the year 1,000. And then, we're looking at it from a European perspective, just keeping it all the way real. We know that all types of things have happened that the Europeans have covered up, but just looking at it from that perspective to understand how far back that will be. You're going back 1,000 years to the year 1,000. Then you're going back to the year 1 AD. Then you go back to 1,000. You're talking about 1, 2, 3,000 years, and then you got 500 because it said 1,500 BC. So that's 30. That's 3,500 years ago. All right. So this is what the time period they're given for the Olmec civilization. Is when they're saying they first started. What they're dating it back to. All right. But in here, it's saying that their origin is actually dated long back before that. One of the many challengers is Boston University professor Robert Schoch, who wrote that another underwater suggested Atlantis location possibly has been suggested by scientists exploring the sea off the west coast of Cuba. Researchers using sonar equipment have found a large submarine plateau and have produced images that look much like pyramids, roads, and buildings viewed from above, right? Submerged, right? And they're almost identical to the pyramids off the nearby Yucatan Peninsula, which is, in Mexico. All right. And then saying that, going further, according to the investigators, these structures seem to be remains of streets, civilized people, streets, pyramids, and buildings. Most of the blocks have gigantic dimensions, reaching to 5 meters of height and several tons of weight. The scientists managed to film a pyramid of almost 35 meters in height, approximately 115 feet. We think that this is no longer a hypothesis, it is a fact, supported by scientists who specialize in geology and archaeology. The existence of pyramidal structures beneath Cuban waters is verified. We only need to gather the details. So they've already filmed it. They know it's there under the water. They just got to get down there and, put in the work, put in some money to, do the research. Believe it or not, cities have sunk in relatively modern times too. The sinking of Port Royal, Jamaica is real and sets the precedence in the same hemisphere as Cuba just a few centuries ago. This city's catastrophe occurred not far from Cuba in 1692 AD when it crashed into the deep blue sea. Shortly before noon on 7 June 1692, 33 acres, 66% of the storehouse and treasury of the West Indies, sank into Kingston, Jamaica's harbor in a disastrous earthquake. So they're saying there's a modern day, cataclysm that sunk that city. It was witnessed by people, right, in 1692 in Jamaica. So, they know that this stuff happens. And so they're saying, like, hey, we've got maybe something even older than that, right? That's under like all this water. It's like, this is something that they've documented, right? But people aren't trying to publicize that. So they'll make the shows on like ancient aliens or something like that, but they're not really going to try to put in any work to expose it because they already know what's going on, and they already know it's not this intergalactic, like weird, crazy scenario of how it got down there. This was regular old so-called black people, so-called African Americans. We're gonna say Moors here though, because we not with the cover up. We're not trying to dumb people down. All right. Going back to this, the modern city of Trujillo is in northern Peru. There are two large pyramids a short drive east of Trujillo. So you even have pyramids out in Peru. As in Mexico, these step pyramids made out of adobe bricks are also called the pyramids of the sun and the moon. The pyramid of the moon is close proximity to the pyramid of the sun. From the top, the pyramid of the sun is a vast empty desert can be seen. The exterior of these once great monuments have now turned to dust. So it's showing that there's all these similarities between South America and Egypt. They have parallels like the pyramids. They have megaliths. They have mummies. They believed in reincarnation. And this is crazy because it's like, when you go to Peru, the nobility in Peru, the noble class, they wore this hat that they called a headdress. I'm not going to call it a hat, but it was a headdress. It was a royal headdress, and the name they called it was a yantu. So they call their royal headdress a yantu, but when it's described, it's a wool headdress that is crimson red, dark red, and it has a tassel. It's like, what is that, Morris? That's a fez. All right. We'll skip around a little bit more. So yeah, let's keep it moving. Skip around a little bit more. All right, just more, speaking about the kinship between, these prehistoric American and civilizations in Egyptian culture. Right, you even seen the Ankh. There's a picture in this book where they had the Ankh found, I think, in Tenochtitlan in Mexico, where you have pyramids and different temples. There's actually like constructed out of stone. There's this ankh on the ground, right? And there's several other things as well, several other similarities as well. But that was just one example. And then all that stuff is pre-Columbian, right? Pre-Mongolian connection, right? So this is talking about the people who actually live here, right? Who actually build all this stuff. He's just stressing once again the Americans, speaking about those people of the Mongolian stock, did not build in megalithic stone. All right. And then all this predated European colonization. Just making that point, and sticking to it. I'm gonna skip around a little bit more, just showing that a lot of the mounds too, especially in Ohio, a lot of these mounds too on the inside they were used to smelt iron, right? And then also for not just for iron but also for copper, right? And then remember this stuff was being traded throughout the nation, even being shipped, potentially overseas. This was occurring, right? There's a story that the Vikings actually admitted that when they needed iron, they went to the black dwarves who were the original metal making smiths that they later called blacksmiths. This is where the word blacksmiths came from. Just as the Viking god of thunder, Thor, did, right? He went to the black dwarf. The black dwarf was the blacksmiths. They were the masters. That's where he went to get his hammer made. So Thor's hammer was made by the dwarves, and they had a name for them, right? The weapon was forged by Svartalfar, the black elves. All right, and Swart. This is Swart, but it's Swartz. That's how they say black. That's like the name Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's Swartz. That's black. So yeah, that was their blacksmiths. That's where it came from, right? The black dwarfs who were the iron workers, who were the metal workers. This is just showing just some more similarities, like the cliff dwellings, which I believe the only place we have cliff dwellings, or at least it's been found, is in that Four Corners area, like Colorado and Arizona. But it's this. I think this is from North Africa, from Mali, from the Dogon people. And then you have like the Adobe, right? Adobe cliff dwellings, right? But then you also have that, of course, here in America, and this one is in Colorado, the Pueblo cliff dwellings. And it's not just like the fact that they're on the cliffs, like the way that they're built, the structures, the way the houses look, everything, right? It's the same. So you got all of these things going on, all of this stuff going on, right? You even have, stories from people who survived the cataclysm, like the Algonquin people on the, northeastern coast of America, right? So when you look at what the Algonquins said, um, and before we speak about that, this brother, you might want to check this book out too. So he's speaking about the cataclysmic event. It probably destroyed most of the ancient civilization, right? A lot of people witnessed this. And he's saying to learn more about this catastrophic event, there's a masterful book written by 3 scientists entitled The Cycle of Cosmic Catastrophes by Dr. Firestone, a nuclear physicist, Dr. West, a scientific consultant, and Warwick Smith, a field exploration geologist. That is The Cycle of Cosmic Catastrophes, right? Comprehensive book with scientific evidence to back their story or their theory. Not saying that's what happened, but he's saying, around 11,000 BC, which would be around 13,000 years ago. They're saying that this cataclysmic event that affected so many people in the ancient world happened 13,000 years ago. Now, the first Algonquin people, survived the cataclysm of 11,000 BC. Right? They're saying this ended the Ice Age. And because they survived, they were able to pass down stories about it. The Algonquin speakers back in 11,000 BC were the Matmuskets, who had migrated down to North Carolina. They witnessed a horrifying meteor shower that was so large it rained down on select areas as far north as Hudson Bay in northern California. The falling stars or meteorites hit the ground with such an impact they made elliptical craters that resembled teardrops. When the meteorites hit the ground, they made terrifying loud noises and shook the ground like an earthquake. The event caused very large fires. There was death all around. As the night wore on and began to rain, it continued raining for 13 months. The rain filled the craters, creating the Carolina Bays. One crater was so large it created an inland lake. It was 15 miles long. They named it Mat- Matamuskets, the lake on the hill, and renamed their tribes after it, right? So there's people who actually witnessed these cataclysms, you know, and we've spoken on that before. Moving to chapter 6 in here too. Um, Now he speaks about these other structures off the coast of the Bahamas, Bimini, that are like they were built. They were like ancient um shipyards almost. They had like these structures that were built, to kind of calm the waters so that ships could come in and dock, saying that trade was going on there, right? And that you can see that stuff if you're above the water, like maybe in a helicopter or something like that, because it's only like under like 20 feet of water, right? But definitely, interesting. But you can find out more about that in this book. But just going into here, right? He's speaking about. Well, I'm gonna go over this. Pardon, Morris. Let me skip over this. I don't want to keep taking up too much time in here, but it definitely, a lot of powerful information in here. Just speaking about the indigenous people. Now, in here we're speaking about Cortez, right? Hernando Cortez. He reported that when he raided the Aztecs, African lion skins were observed being worn by the Aztec king Montezuma. It is well known that tobacco was first found in America, right? Tobacco and the other foods that originated in Africa were exported and shipped to the Americas, right? So sweet potatoes and yams were in the Americas before the Europeans arrived, right? Bouncing over to the Olmec people who, they were called the rubber people. These people discovered, that they could, get rubber from this tree sap, right? And they were actually getting this, doing this not just for their games, but this is something that they were trading in rubber, right? They were supplying, rubber to, other parts of the world, even shipping it to Africa. The products that were being imported to the Americas from Africa were bananas, plantains, sorghum, yams, sweet potatoes, right? Saying hybridized brown jack bean, peanuts, the bottle gourd, and lion skins. And then this is why you would have had people like Montezuma, the king, wearing lion skins, right? And then there were products that were being deported in the opposite direction, back to Africa from the America, and that was corn, copper, cotton, tobacco, cocaine, silver, and animal furs and rubber. Okay? And so this is why you would have that stuff like tobacco and cocaine being found in the in the remains of people in Egypt, people in other parts of the world. This one's speaking about international trade was taking place. Like there's no way in hell you could believe that the Europeans were the first ones to do this. They weren't even they were the last ones to join the international trade game, right? They had to literally get permission from the Moors to trade. They were paying tribute to the Moors, the Barbary states, up until for some of them up until the early 1900s. But for the most part, the colonial powers were all paying up throughout the late 1800s, right? So this is speaking about the mummy of Ramses II of the 19th Egyptian dynasty. They found something that threw them for a loop. It was something they just could not accept. Ramses II's mummy had traces of American tobacco and cocaine in his stomach. This was not an anomaly. In Munich, Germany, they acquired 134 mummies from a Sudan cemetery, Nubia, to be investigated. Each of these 134 mummies tested positive for cocaine and nicotine as well. In ancient times, tobacco grew only in the Americas and cocaine only in Bolivia. This is prima facie evidence. So there's traditions of Egyptians and probably people from other parts of the Nile Valley traveling back and forth to the Americas, which is impossible to explain away in this instance. So we know that trade was happening throughout the Americas, but also across the Atlantic. All right. Throughout the ancient world. And so that's why you have, all these ancient structures, these pyramids, these temples found on both sides of the Atlantic and found throughout the ancient world, period. Right? Because you even finding stuff in Asia, right? In India, all of these different places. So this trade, all of this is going on. Nobody's talking about it, or people are trying to cover it up, or other people are trying to take credit for it. But we know what's really going on. Now, there's a story. The Walam Olam says the Adena Telega mound builders constructed trade networks that extended for hundreds of miles, and precious objects might travel for thousands. The Walam Olam, what's that? Real quick, because we're talking about the words of the actual indigenous Americans. So you got to listen to that. What are they saying about themselves? All right. So the Walam Olam is usually translated as red record or red score, and it is the historical narrative of the Lenni Lenape Native American tribe. Okay, so this is saying that they had extended trade networks that went for hundreds of miles, and precious objects would travel for thousands of miles. So shoppers in the ancient markets of the Midwest could choose among items from the East Coast to the Rockies to Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. There's an old Delaware Indian legend that says that in ancient times there was a road system of white roads that stretched across America. This is the ancient Delaware Indian legend. They're not teaching this, right? They had a system of white roads that stretched across America. There was some type of honor system that protected travelers on these roads. As long as travelers stayed on the white path, they could not be attacked. These roads were not at all narrow. They were 170 by 160 to 170 feet wide. Roads that went across the country like this. The level of civilization is ridiculous. Nobody's teaching us this, right? They're teaching us the indigenous people were savage. They didn't have no system of writing. They had a system of writing. They even had scrolls that were made out of copper. They had written words in it. None of this is being talked about, right? The roads were for let's see, running long and running from the southwest to the Midwest. Ancient Ohio's Great Hopewell Highway was 60 miles long, defined by earthen mound walls, replete with ceremonial circles like rest stops, existed during prehistoric times in Ohio. Another one of the Hopewell's roads ran for 56 miles in a straight line. Right? Just incredible. And none of this stuff, this just flies in the face of everything. Anything that, we're being taught, what anyone's saying. And these were our people, our ancestors that were doing this. Like, just as it says, in the video description or in the video title, these were Moors, right? Civilized Moors who were engaging in trade, travel, international. All right. Flies in the face of what anyone is talking about right now, and it's true. So, I want to keep it moving, but speaking about the first, Americans or Africans, I know our brothers, he was Afrocentric, so he's gonna put it in Africa, even if the people here and existing at the same time as ancient civilizations like Egypt, they were coexisting and were trading. That doesn't necessarily mean that the people had to come from there to over here, but we know that's his perspective, right? But just the understanding that these people were global, all right, that's really the main thing that you need to take from this. Now, I want to speak about something else too, because when we look into this thing goes deep. The people who are getting upset about this, they don't want to hear, what's being said. They want us to stop talking about it. It's because there's nothing that can stop this now. The truth is out. Even the Europeans that don't necessarily want this truth to get out, they're covering it scientifically, right? from a genetic perspective, there's evidence that we were already here and that we're ancient. Now you have Albert Perry, who was an older man, a so-called black man from South Carolina. He carried the oldest known Y DNA lineage, over 3,000, pardon, pardon, let me put some respect on his DNA, over 340,000 years old. All right, his DNA predates the so-called Y chromosomal atom by 100,000 years. I'm gonna show you that, right? And it's so important that it forces a reversion or a revision of all the timelines and suggests a much older, deeper so-called African presence. But he wasn't African, he was from America. He was from South Carolina. So if the oldest man's lineage is found in South Carolina, not in East Africa, it demands people to rethink, even just to rethink our global origins. Because even with the book was just reading from, just because you found someone here who is, because we are brothers and sisters, potentially related, to people from, distant cousins and relatives from people, from different parts of Africa, doesn't negate the fact that we from here and might even be older than them. So the DNA of Albert Perry may change the story of human origins, because they're always going to try to say, oh, the older people, everyone came out of Africa and just moved across the world. That makes no sense. If that's true, if we just lightened up as we went into different places, how come the Eskimos have brown, skin complexion? Come on. And they've been there for thousands of years now. Right? So you had this analysis of the DNA of his descendants, and it produced results that came as quite a surprise. Raised questions for geneticists around the world. This isn't some meme. This isn't some foolishness. Real scientific discussion about him. It's ongoing, and it turns out that he carried a very different type of Y chromosome never seen before. Every male has a Y chromosome, which is a piece of DNA inherited by sons from their fathers, but unlike most DNA, the Y chromosome is not shuffled as it's passed down. It changes only slowly through mutation. Tracking these mutations allows scientists to create a genetic tree of fathers and sons going back through time. All right, so as many may have several sons or more, some branches of the genetic tree die out each generation, while others become more common. All right, and so going back through time, it is therefore inevitable that all modern Y chromosomes must descend from one man at some point in the past. Is become known as Y chromosomal atom. This atom was not the first man or the only man from his time to contribute to modern DNA. It is just that by chance his Y chromosome was the only one to survive until today. What is surprising about Perry's Y chromosome is that it did not descend from Y chromosome or Y chromosomal atoms, or rather that he established Adam, right? The established Adam has lost his title to a new Adam, further back in time, where Perry's branch split from the tree. And there's a figure right here. So the former Adam is estimated to have lived 202,000 years ago. The revised one now, because of Albert Perry from South Carolina, is thought to be about 338,000 years old. Right, so almost 340,000 years ago. Albert. This is where his ancestors go back to. His great grandfather. Right. And so it's just showing that and this is the thing about it. They're gonna try to put it in Africa, saying Cameroon. But why didn't they go to someone from Cameroon and find this ancient lineage? Why are they saying that humans started around 200,000 years ago, modern humans? Why didn't they go to Cameroon and get it? Why is it from someone in South Carolina? So this changes everything, right? This flips everything, turns everything on its head. All right? Even, people that are, staunch Afrocentric. This changes everything, because if that's true, why not go to Burkina Faso? Why not go to Cameroon? Why not go, somewhere over there and get evidence, get, genetic evidence of the oldest, lineage for humans, modern humans, right? And then just once again, this is the New Scientist magazine talking about the same thing. The father of all men is 340,000 years old, and guess what? Right, this came from a man from South Carolina. And they're still trying to place it in Africa because that is the modern narrative or the common narrative. One possible explanation is that hundreds of thousands of years ago, modern and archaic humans in Central Africa inbred. Right. But guess what? He lived in South Carolina. All right. So the roots go far deeper than they will say. We have to do our own research. We have to be able to, come at this from our own perspective to get the truth. Because nobody is going to tell what's really going on here. Nobody. We're the only ones that can put it together. And when you look at that, I mean, going back to the Americas now, since this brother was from South Carolina, we're looking at this article from Nature, nature.com, and it's basically speaking about the findings, dual findings for populations of the Americas. So this is from July 2015, and this is going against the common narrative a little bit because they're not saying that the oldest humans in the Americas came over the Bering Strait, right? Just to summarize this, it's saying that certain Amazonian tribes have DNA related to indigenous Australians, Melanesians, and Andaman Islanders. So I want to go, just let's get some examples of what these people look like. Because, if you're talking about indigenous Australians, most of indigenous Australians, so-called Aborigines, you know what they look like, right? They dark skinned, they look like so-called black people. But guess what? Guess what the Melanesians look like? I mean, they're up here on the screen. And this is what they're saying, that these findings are showing that the oldest people, the oldest Americans, right? Not saying that all the indigenous Americans look like this, but they're saying that, in these Amazonian tribes, this is who they're more closely related to, right? And it's like, this could be the indigenous Australians as well. And then let's look, because they also said the Andaman Islanders. What do the people from the Andaman Islands look like? What do they look like? Andaman Islands. What? Oh. This is what the people of the Andaman Islands look like? Remember when they had that story a couple years ago about how the people there at this island that doesn't have contact with the outside world, they were killing anybody that would come there. They ain't letting nobody come into that island. All right, this is them. So you have some difference, but for the most part, this is what they look like. They're not really out here mixing with the outside world. Okay? So this is what they're saying. So, like, the whole narrative is being switched up. Because it's saying that not all Native Americans came from Siberia. Some came across the Pacific or just were already present. They might not have had to come over here on boats because maybe they were already here. Maybe they were already here when the cataclysms were happening, right? Because that also is coming from that narrative that everyone came from Africa. So if they came here, they must have come somehow from Africa. But we know that's a flawed narrative. All right, but that's being changed. So it's just reinforcing that there was actually diversity even within the ancient American population, and that Moors, so-called black people, were already here. We didn't all have to get brought over on slave ships, right? So they're not gonna put that connection together for us in this article from Nature.com, but this is a scientific exploration that is showing that, hey, that common narrative, you're gonna have to break that apart. It's outdated, right? It's outdated. So it's saying genetic studies, have consistently indicated a single common origin of Native American groups from Central and South America. However, some morphological studies have suggested a more complex picture. So they're starting to change, slowly opening up to an understanding that that is more in alignment with the truth. We're gonna have to, do our part, right? Because we don't have to go along with the common narrative. We don't have to, right? And oh yeah, just to go back to something that was mentioned by the brother mentioned by our brother David Imhotep, who wrote that book. Um, the first Americans were African. Now he spoke on there like, I believe one of the things he was trying to do was put together tours going to the Bahamas and looking at the Egyptian artifacts, or what he calls Egyptian artifacts, looking at the um, artifacts that show there's a sunken civilization right off the coast. And he was saying to just Google Egyptian pyramid found, sunken off the coast of Bahamas. Now, when you look this up, you find out that this is real. This actually happened. Like, you actually have a sphinx that was found, right? And there's a report of a sphinx, a 2,005-year-old sphinx. I don't know how they know the age. Let's pull up that article. 2,500-year-old sphinx, says archaeologists, off the coast of the Bahamas. And they're saying there's an underwater team of archaeologists studying an ancient shipwreck of unknown origin near the eastern coast of the Bahamas. They made an astonishing discovery. They found a large stone statue resembling in shape and design the Egyptian Great Sphinx. All right. And they're absolutely certain, or not absolutely certain at the moment as to what this discovery actually means. But they can tell, from its shape, its design, it's, several tons. Erosion has occurred and all of this stuff. They need to do more work, but they know that this thing, is old. It's pre-colonial contact, just from what they've, done so far. And that's about all they know right now. But just speaking about this because, just showing once again, you have archaeology that's being suppressed. Knowledge, understanding is, being pushed back. And what a lot of this stuff is showing, just going back to the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, what he said in chapter 47 about our ancestors receiving permission from the pharaohs to settle and inhabit in Northwest Africa, right? And even unto the Americas, right? North, South, Central America, and the Atlantis Islands before the great earthquake, which caused the great Atlantic Ocean. This is important for us to understand how these things relate to us and to be able to do our own research, to piece everything together for ourselves. We don't need anyone else's permission. If we're looking for someone else's permission or stamp of approval, we're going to be limited because they have to keep the lie going. They have to conceal. They can't tell the truth. So we have to do the work ourselves. I wanted to speak briefly about this King Atlas, right? You can actually go to this Mauritania, go to the Wikipedia for Mauritania. So when you go to the actual Wikipedia page speaking about the actual land of Mauritania, it speaks about this legendary king. King Atlas was a legendary king of Mauritania, so it's mythological. He was credited with inventing the celestial globe. He was the first known historical king of Mauritania, right? And they're saying that, for the most part, they're saying he's mythological, but they're giving his reign as possibly in the 6th century BC. Let me pull that. I can't pull it up no more. I had that timeline up there. So they're saying around 6th century BC. All right. And Atlas, when you look into the story of Atlas, King Atlas, all right, King Atlas was supposed to be one of Poseidon's sons, right? He was an Atlantean, and he was the king over the land of Mauritania. That was his, his realm and his rule, all right? And so, this is all, presented just as story. But there's actual artifacts found in Mauritania that line up with the actual story or the myth of the capital of Atlantis. I want to show something real quick. We have some stuff in here, actually some videos that go a little bit more deeper into this, and maybe we could just focus on this on one video. But you have actual structures like the Reshot structure in Mauritania which line up with the description of the capital of Atlantis. All of these things, right? That are physical, that are verifiable. They line up with this to the point where it all we have to do is stick to what our prophet revealed to us, do our own work, our own archaeology, our own write our own story. You know, pretty much piece things together for ourselves. We know who we are, and we can trace ourselves back through time, whether we're looking at genetics or we're looking at actual artifacts. We can actually trace ourselves back through time, and I mean going back thousands of years until the today. You know, so all of this stuff lines up. Everything lines up. All we have to do is do the work for ourselves. Once we do that, we can see why there's a systematic whitewashing to the point where, the indigenous Americans are becoming the pale skinned Europeans, right? To the point where it's comical. No one else is going to talk about this. I just wanted to just really hit on that. No one, this stuff was actually covered, on a nationwide basis a couple of years ago, and no one pointed out the obvious. And it's like, now you'll see why. Now if you see so-called Native Americans that look like this dude, it looks like he's in the Halloween costume, you see people like that getting mad. You know why? Because they don't want you to know who you are. They don't want you to make that simple connection, right? So it's systematic. It's being done at a deeper level, and it's being done to erase our identity, our Moorish identity. So it's time out for that. We know we were always here. The facts are undeniable, right? The receipts are undeniable. Our nationality, our divine creed, our true story has to be restored. The Prophet Noble Drew Ali said, "We are descendants of the ancient Moabites who inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa, in the Americas, being the true West, right? The Maghreb al-Aqsa. This is it. So we don't need anyone else to co-sign on it. We don't need anyone else to agree with us. All we have to do is be us." So I just want to call on everybody that's watching to make sure that you study, join and proclaim your nationality, do the great work to help uplift fallen humanity, which means, starting with ourselves. Let's uplift ourselves. Let's build up our communities. Let's strengthen ourselves and strengthen our connection to truth, right? Starting with strengthening our connection to truth within, right? Unfolding our own higher self. And before I close out, I just want to speak real quickly on some things. I did put out a book just recently, right? Matter of fact, it just came out just a few months ago, and it's called Unlocking the Keys. Now, Unlocking the Keys, you can find it on Amazon. I have the link in the description. As you can see on here from the reviews, we have all 5-star ratings, right? People love it. People sharing their reviews on there, all positive, all love. Also, just a great book, extremely helpful in assisting you in being the best version of yourself. And if you just want a preview of it real quick, got it right here. This breaks down the Quran questionnaire from the Prophet, and it gives you practical tips on how to use the Prophet's divine instructions to save yourself. Basically, just bringing it straight to you. And this is beautiful artwork from my daughter, but she designed that cover for us. But going here, it shows you how the Prophet is giving us these divine instructions to set us on the solid rock of salvation, right? And it gives you those steps, like in a realistic way, so that you can use it and take it to the next level. And I really, wrote this so that Moors can take this and use it for themselves and their households, but also to be able to teach it, whether you're teaching it to your children, right? Whether you're actually teaching this to adults in class. It's made in a way so that you can actually understand it and use it for yourself, to save yourself, right? Breaking down the higher and lower self and everything, and putting it into a way so that we can all, impact our own lives and realize our true potential. This is what it's really about, all about Moors. And so on that note, I want to go ahead and close things out. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you go and get that book. You can get it on Amazon, but if you want to get it from me, Pretty soon, my Moors in America website will be done getting updated, and you can just get it from there. But for now, if you're watching this like right now, you can just go on Cash App and send a Cash App to $L Douglas L. Let's pull that up. $L Douglas L right here. Cash App. You send it right there on Cash App to $L Douglas L. And if you're in America, in the United States of America, send 32 even. That'll cover the shipping. And I'll send that out to you and also autograph it. Right? And so you can get it direct from me right now. In the future, you want to get it direct from me, just go to moorsinamerica.com. You can always get it on Amazon. But if you want an autographed copy straight from me, right now, just send the Cash App to L Douglas L. DOUGLASEL on Cash App, and I'll get that out to you ASAP. And on that note, Moors, we are getting up out of here. Make sure you also go to the video description, check out the links in there, support. You can always send a donation to the channel so that we can continue to do this great work. And we are up out of here. Peace and love, Moors. Peace.
A powerful guide to Moorish identity, divine law, and self-mastery. Praised by sheiks and scholars alike, and Moors across the nation are calling it a must-read. Grab your signed copy now at moorsinamerica.com for just $23. Or get the paperback on Amazon, also $23. Prefer digital? The Kindle version is only $3.99.
I am not a Negro, Black, colored, African American. I'm a Moorish American. Peace.
Yeah. Hey, 5 on the right, 2 on the left, man. You know what time it is. Yo. We just Moors in America, soar through the shores and endure criminal acts of war on our character. 7 years after the 4th score, no reward. Shout out to the most courageous, they was jumping over barriers. Where does that compare to you? We come from a place where you scared to visit our area. We come from a place where it's scary for good Samaritans. Heavy luggage we carrying, babies having babies. It's crazy being American. Praise the one and only Allah, there's no comparison. La ilaha illa Allah, body and buried gin. Laughing at you clowns like ha-ha, dodging the Nephilim. Conquer lower self with the high, follow your regimen. Way before they came we were gods and now we specimen. Tried to take the light from our eyes, thank God for Edison. Then they put the wool on our eyes, it's so embarrassing. Now we travel frequently, we should invest in Sheraton. All of us got gold on our bodies whenever we stepping in. Screaming Ramadan, Mubarak, training the flesh again. Wishing we could move as a unit just like the Mexicans. Dodging all the foods with estrogen, synthetic medicines. All sin isn't devilish. Sometimes the decisions that you make come for a better gift. Sometimes when you sin is to relate to all your brethren. Heavenly gates all in our face, we the champions. We live in the sky, we see the angels on the chariots. Waiting on the $20 bill, face a Harriet. I bet you I'ma carry it. I'm in love with music to the point I wanna marry it. But my love for people is greater, so I write messages. Largest spending power, but we still sit at a deficit. Living amongst prejudice, even at our residence. Moors in America, flourishing, excellent. Let's buy up some neighborhoods and groom our own president. Yeah. And I come to you today with all intentions of spreading love, truth, peace.